Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Before we jump into today's video, I just want to thank everybody. I've had so much support, even when I put out videos that people generally don't agree with. I appreciate all the comments, people viewing, all the people subscribing. Really, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much. But I don't want to belabor that too long, so thank you, but let's jump into the video. What are we talking about today? Well, you read the title of the video, so you probably know. What are you going to do with your last action? Yes, that doesn't apply to everybody, but I think we see, whether we're players or GMs, we see people end up with these one actions they have at the end of their turn, and they're just not sure what to do with it. Maybe you're a melee marshal, you ran up, you took out a creature with your first strike, and now you're sitting there. You could stride again, but there's no really great places to go, and you're not sure what you want to do with that. Or you're a ranged character, you took 2 shots, and you don't really need to move, you're in a great place. What are you going to do with this last action you have? How do you take advantage of it in the best possible way? Well, today I want to run through a bunch of great last action options that most, if not everybody, can use. Obviously, there's going to be actions that are specific to classes, and there's no way I could possibly hope to cover those in a video like this without going really, really deep. So we're not going to do that, right? I'm not going to get into individual class feat options that give you one action, or even class features that give you one option. I'm going to be talking about things that anybody could potentially access and how they can be used really, really well. You notice that the majority of these, if not all of them, they're going to avoid the attack trait, because most of the time when you have one action left, either you're a marshal that's already used so many attack actions, multiple attack penalties, terrible, and you're not going to get much out of these, or you might be a caster, but then anything with the attack action might not do you a whole lot of good because you haven't invested enough into whatever skill or attack that might be to get much value out of it. So don't expect a whole lot of attack actions, if any, in this entire video. I'm trying to avoid that to give you a lot of other options. Most of them will be skill related, but certainly not all of them, because we have plenty to cover before we get to those. Now, there are a few actions that just kind of always make sense, at least to a degree. I hinted at that a little bit. Things like stride, step, fly, these basic movement actions, they're almost never going to be a bad choice. This is a game that it's hard to use movement because you have to use actions to take these movements, but that makes repositioning really valuable, right? Even stepping away from an enemy forces them to use movement to get back up to you. Striding away and getting into the right position can make it hard for enemies to target you, and you might even get away to dodge some of the damage that they throw out in an AoE. So repositioning is often quite good. Step doesn't just get you away from enemies, it gets you away without triggering their reactions, right? Stride, if you've got a great distance to cover with stride, you may get so far away that a creature has to take 2 actions just to get up to you, and that was a huge win for you. So all of the movement speed options, they're going to be valuable in some way. Keep those in mind. Even if you are in the case where you have done a stride, took something out, it can sometimes be the best idea just to stride towards your next target, or stride toward your ally to protect them. These things are a great idea, so never give up on movement. It's always really valuable. And one last one I do want to call out, fly. For those who aren't aware, in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, if you are flying and you have not used a fly action on a given turn, with the exception of certain spells and abilities, it means that you're going to fall from the sky. You have to use a fly action while flying to stay flying, generally speaking. So, as a final action, if you haven't done a fly action, you're going to want to do that. Please, please keep that in mind. So those I consider the most basic actions, right? The movement actions are the most basic final action you can take. But there are more actions that anybody can take as long as the situation's correct. So these are actions that don't require skills. They're just base actions in the game. First of those is take cover. So this is a great choice if you're already in a situation to use it. To be able to take cover, you have to be near something that can act as cover for you, or already be behind cover, or simply be prone in order to use it. But then it's going to increase your cover, giving you a massive +4 circumstance bonus to your AC and reflex saves, or at least granting you some cover, getting you to a +2 bonus instead of that +4, right? So it depends if you already had some cover and you got greater, or if you had no cover and now have cover. These bonuses are really good. right? It's a huge decrease in your chance to be crit when you get a +2 or +4 bonus to your AC. So think about taking advantage of these. I think a lot of times people aren't even aware this is a thing in the system, and they can be really beneficial. There is a special situation here as well with being prone. So if you're a spellcaster or a character who doesn't worry about attacks, so you're not taking attack penalty, you're not using attack in any way, then when you're prone, you're not actually taking a lot of disadvantages as long as no creatures are near you. You are off guard while you're prone. But when you cast a spell that has a save to it, or take any action that requires a save from your enemies, that doesn't take any penalty. If you take an attack action, there's a penalty to that from being prone. So it doesn't always hurt you to be prone. In fact, prone can sometimes be a smart way to kind of hide out from enemy attacks if you want to. Be careful how you use it, but you could take cover while prone and gain some bonus back here. Although never forget that it does take an action to get up from prone. So maybe don't intentionally prone yourself unless it's a big part of your whole strategy. We got two other general actions, and one of those is raise a shield. The other one's going to be sustain. We'll get to that in a second. Anybody can use a shield in the system. This is something I loved when I came to the system. I was tired of D&D 5e saying, oh, you have to have proficiency in shields in order to strap one onto your arm. No, you can just use a shield. Now, it doesn't do you any good unless you raise it, though, and that is the difference. So you have to actually use an action to raise a shield. Lots of classes that use shields heavily will get some sort of action compression to raise a shield while doing something else, but anybody can raise a shield. And sometimes, as, say, a spellcaster, your best choice might be, okay, I'm going to raise the shield. I used 2 actions to do this cool spell I wanted to use, and I don't need to move because I'm in a great place. I'm just going to raise my shield. I have no other cover. This is giving me a +2 to AC. Fantastic. The raise a shield is a good thing to have and to keep in mind. Some casters want to keep both hands completely open, so you may not want a shield. We'll get to other options around shielding, but if you do think you can afford a shield on your build and have that hand occupied, yeah, it's going to be great to raise a shield and give yourself a +2 to AC. That's going to feel good. And speaking of those casters, we have sustain. Doesn't just have to be the caster, but sustain is a mechanic where for one action, if you have something that can be sustained, you keep it going by using the sustained action. Now, actions that are sustained, I want to just explain how they work, okay? So let's take spells as probably the easiest version. Turn 1, spellcaster. I cast a spell that says it can be sustained up to such a duration. Great. So I've cast my spell on turn 1. On turn 2, that spell is still active my entire turn 2. That will only turn off. It'll only stop working if I don't sustain it by the end of my turn. So on turn 2, I don't use a sustain action, and at the end of turn 2, whatever the magic was, ends. But if on turn 2, my first 2 actions were other cool things I'm doing, and my third action is sustain, that's now going to go all the way through until the end of my turn 3, where I can sustain it again. So sustain is not always something you have to do. Sometimes you just want to let your spells fizzle out because they've done what they needed to do and you don't care. Other times, sustain is massive. It is potentially possible to cast a 3-action spell that you can sustain, and then next turn you cast a 2-action spell and you sustain your 3-action spell. Maybe that 2-action spell can also be sustained, so on the next turn you're just running around sustaining 2 spells, doing cool things. Sustain's actually a really interesting mechanic in the game. Now, there are some limits on how long you can sustain things, but I'm not going to worry too much about that here. The fact of the matter is, sometimes sustain is the best third action you can have. All right, so those are some basic ones that had no attributes tied to them. They were just great things to do with your last action. Now let's talk about some actions that are tied to different attributes that you might have really high numbers in, like, say, charisma. I love charisma in this game. In fact, it's good in a lot of games. But anyway, it's really good in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. There are lots of powerful skills powered by charisma, as well as many spellcasters that use charisma. And we even have Near Marshal. A Near Marshal? Just one Near Marshal that uses charisma? Yeah. Anyway, some of the best skills in the game also use charisma. And the fact is, if you have high charisma, you probably are trained or better proficiency than trained in one of those skills. My favorite of those charisma skills is Intimidation, because I get to use Demoralize. This is the base combat action from the Intimidation skill. If you know you only need 2 actions this turn, It's usually better to use it actually before the rest of your turn, because you can try to demoralize a creature you're going to target, and then that's going to be way easier to hit with your attacks. But still, it's just a good thing to do. Sometimes you don't know what you're needed to do, and you might take out a creature before you thought you would, so you've got an extra action. This is a great choice to say, all right, there's this enemy creature over here. If I demoralize it, I'm going to frighten it, and boom, now my team can take advantage of that. Again, the frighten condition is very, very good. Even frighten 1 is reducing so many different stats from a creature. It's almost effective to that creature going down 1 CR level. Not quite, but it's kind of in that vein, right? If you critically succeed and they end up with frighten 2, it's a real big hit. So it's just a strong way to end out. Now, you can only demoralize the same creature once in a combat, but it's still worth doing, and it's still worth having, in your back pocket, just to throw out there, because you might be able to take advantage of it. And a lot of classes actually do take advantage of frightened creatures and the demoralize action. So it might just be a good choice because it fits your character build. Then we have Deception, which gives us a couple of interesting actions. Sadly, not always good at the end of a turn. So while I do think Feint is great, it's not good at the end because you're setting yourself up for something this turn. And then you've got Created Diversion. And both are helpful earlier in the turn than they are at the end. So just try to keep that in mind. But sometimes Created Diversion can help you later on as a third action. Then we've got Diplomacy. Diplomacy doesn't have anything out the gate that is going to help you necessarily as a third action, but for a level 1 skill feat, you can take Bon Mot. This creates an interesting debuff on an enemy that spellcasters can take advantage of, which is great because it's going to drop their will saves. This is actually really helpful when you're trying to debilitate them with other types of mental effects, put other debuffs on them. Will saves come up a lot. So that can be a really great thing to do. Plus, they have to waste an action to quit back at you to get rid of it. So Bon Mot can be one of the best choices to just end out a turn. And then Performance doesn't give us much, but you could always look at the Perform action. If you take enough feats, it can be an interesting final action, but you have to really dedicate to it. So I'm not going to talk about it too much here. Anyway, that's the charisma stuff. How about Intelligence? Intelligence is going to give us over half of our great uses of Recall Knowledge. This is a single action that you really shouldn't underestimate. I often feel like it is underused, unless you got characters in your party like Thaumaturges or Investigators, which use it all the time, built into their skills for their class, which I'm so happy about because it's very, very good. But you've got Arcana, Occultism, Society, and Crafting, all of which have Recall Knowledge situations that are int-based. So there might be combats where you can't use these because, it might be different skills you need to use in order to recall anything about the creatures or situation or location or whatever. But given the variety of Recall Knowledge options you have here, it's likely something lands, and that makes int pretty solid for that final action. Then we have our final mental stat, which is Wisdom. Very similar to Intelligence, it's going to give us Recall Knowledge options, this time with Nature and Religion. Yes, it's a much smaller set of skills, but the broad application of them makes up for it. With Nature, we've got anything to do in the forests, a lot of our natural creatures we run into in a lot of adventures. And on the Religion side, we've got undead, demons, angels. So lots of things you find pulled into all sorts of campaigns. You're very likely to be able to use both of these, honestly. Getting back toward the physical realm of things, with Dexterity, we have Tumble Through with Acrobatics. This is just stride with upside. So you can stride and then move through an enemy space. Granted, it's difficult terrain to go through their space, but it can be a crucial option to get out of harm's way. So it's just a good idea. If you're in a situation where you're not sure what to do with your last action, but you've got a couple enemies too close and the only way out is through them, this is a critical one. So don't forget that you have this as an option, as long as you just always have it, but it's going to use your acrobatics. And the other one you might want to take advantage of with Dex, that's a single action, but can be good in certain situations, is Sneak. Now, you have to be hidden or undetected or similar to be able to do this. So it's not maybe the most common final action, but it can be. It's especially powerful when you've used an earlier action to hide. So you might want to hide for various reasons. Maybe you've got a lot of enemies focused on you rather than your team. As soon as you take an action to hide, if you've got one left, sneak off. They're going to have to seek to find you. You're going to be in a much better place. If they're wasting actions to stride around and then seek, you're probably doing pretty good. Honestly, that's probably helping your team out a ton. So don't forget that this is there, but unfortunately, it does have to be set up in order to get a lot of value out of sneak. Some classes are going to do a lot better job than others. And our final attribute is strength, because con doesn't have any actions tied to it. Most of the strength actions, though, are going to have the attack trait. The exceptions being climb and swim, which, of course, when you need those actions. They're good to have. Climbing is great, right? If you have to climb in a situation, because you have to do it. If you have to swim in a situation, because you have to do it. Whereas actions like grapple, which are extremely strong, they can be good as a third action, but not if you've already been doing anything with the attack trait, which means basic strikes or any of your actions that do attacks. Grappling as a final action, or tripping or disarming, whatever, these aren't going to feel great, because the multiple attack penalty is going to make them far less likely to work out. It doesn't mean that they're the wrong choice, just cautioning that if you're saving to do grapple at the end of your turn, hopefully you've been just trying to force enemies to do saves up until then. Or you've just been, buffing your allies or something. And the last set of final actions I want to talk about, far from the least though, are cantrips. Cantrips matter because they take no resource, and it's actually really easy to get a hold of them. Yeah, sure, all casters will have cantrips, but most caster multi-class archetypes give them to you as well, right? Even if it's only 1 or 2 you can prepare a day, that's enough. Then there are a lot of ancestries that'll just give you an option to have a cantrip, either through a heritage or an ancestry feat itself. And then there are several one-action cantrips that we really need to take a look at. If you didn't watch my video on my favorite and least favorite cantrips, you'll notice I'm going to talk about a few here. There's 2 in particular I think are worth having just for this purpose of using that last action. And the first is shield. Sometimes you can't afford to equip an actual shield on your build. Okay, but you can still cast the shield cantrip. And the shield cantrip still works without a free hand to hold it, because it's not a held kind of shield. Now, it's only a +1 to AC, but it's still a plus to AC for casting a 1-action shield on yourself, and that's great. Also, if you have shield active, you can try to block with it, but then if it blocks damage and breaks, you can't use it again for a while. But still, shield is a great 1-action, even if you're just using it for the +1 to AC. Then there's guidance, which I like even more, especially for other classes that aren't usually doing a lot of spellcasting. You can use guidance to provide a nice, simple, but valuable buff to an ally. It means at the end of your turn, your friend's about to go, just boom, hit them with guidance. They're going to get a +1 onto a d20 roll. That is going to be huge. Yes, you don't get to do it every turn to every ally. Once you've given them all a guidance, you're going to have to wait till your next combat, but still, really, really valuable. There are, of course, other cantrips that are 1-action. These are just the 2 I like the most, and I would recommend everybody take a look at those 2 if you can when you're grabbing cantrips. If you can't get one of those, okay, look at other things, but those are the 2 big ones. My first way through recording this, I actually forgot to bring up one of the best ones, which is Aid. Aid is interesting because if you look it up, you'll see it's a reaction, but actually it takes setup. Setup usually being an action. So yes, you're going to use 1 action. It can be great to use your last action on a turn to do this, and then work with your GM on why you think you're able to aid your ally in whatever way you're planning on aiding them. So you're going to choose an ally, say, ooh, I'm going to aid them with this attack, and explain how you're going to do that. And GM's on board. Great. Now, when you take your reaction to help with the aid, you're going to make a check, and that alters their bonus they get from your aid check. It could actually not help them, but assuming you beat the check, then you're going to give them some kind of aid, whether it's a +2 all the way up to possibly a +4 at higher levels. So it's a great way to help somebody else succeed at something using your last action and reaction to pull it off. I would have been in a very bad position had I not mentioned it. And there we go. Now, rather than not know what you could possibly do with your last action, hopefully now you have too many choices and you really have to think about, what are all these things I want to do? I don't mean to lock you in indecision, but at least you know that there are things to do with that final action. Fantastic. With my job done, I wish you the best in making up your mind And as always, adventure on.